We are going to be discussing a very important, powerful idea that most people don't want to cope with. Mortality is the mystery of life. And therefore, it has also become, for many people, the great fear that we have, in the sense that we know who we are now, but what happens to us afterwards. And people who lack faith, or today, a certain new understanding that I will discuss with you, treat it primarily as something that is too horrible even to think about. And so I want to tell you about the day that I found out that I'm going to die, and the day that changed my life and changed it in a positive way. Let me clarify and tell you that a number of years ago, I went for my annual physical. And normally it was a simple procedure. It just took a little time. And the doctor would then inform me that everything is okay, except I should be a little more careful about this, or a little more careful about that. This time, he looked at me without smiling and said, "Rabbi, I have some bad news to share with you, and I would appreciate it if, before I do that, you call your wife and tell her to come to my office so that I can tell the both of you it's something that you need to share." And that alone was quite frightening. I called my wife, sat in the waiting room. An hour later, my wife was there. We both saw the doctor. And he said, "I'm sorry to have to break this to you, but you have a fatal disease for which there is no cure." And when I asked, does that mean that there is a short span that I still have left to live? He said, "Well, probably about 6 months. That's the average." You can imagine what that did to me. We spoke a little bit more, and I went home, and then I looked at the internet, which I shouldn't have done. And indeed, it said that the most you can expect is from 6 months to a year. The name of the illness is cardiac amyloidosis. Amyloids are terrible things. If they attack the brain, you get Alzheimer's. If they attack the heart, the walls of the heart harden, and it is no longer able to function and pump blood properly. And then you say goodbye. I found that very hard to adjust to, obviously. And I began two things: further research, not only into Jewish sources, but into world sources, philosophy, theology, other faiths, and so on. New medical research. And then I did something that I have done several times in my life. I find that writing about a subject is cathartic. And so I began, as I researched more and more, to write more and more. And I have to tell you that in retrospect, perhaps the turning point in my life, and a turning point for the good, and a turning point for me to understand the meaning of my life, the purpose of my life, what I hope yet to accomplish, what I did accomplish, how I view my family relationships, and in general, the whole meaning of my life became altered in a way that made me see what I did not see before. And I wrote a book. The book has had a profound impact. It's called Hope, Not Fear: Changing the Way We View Death. I just this past Shabbat met somebody, and he said, "Rabbi, you're costing me a fortune because I've at this point bought 75 copies of the book. I give it to every person that I know who I'm friendly with because it has changed my life." And I said it did the same for me. What is the real meaning of death? What is so strange on the surface is that I was so shocked by the fact that I was told that I'm going to die, when in fact that is the common end of all of us. And yet we never face up to that. We never acknowledge that. We never choose to recognize that I'm going to die. But then you begin to think about what your life means, and you begin to understand things you never understood before, so that an awareness of death is probably the most meaningful change that can happen to you, because I am not the same person that I was when I got that verdict. First, let me tell you that this story happened more than 12 years ago, and I am still here. There is a prominent doctor who took my case and who advised me, but also said to me that he lectures around the world on cardiac amyloidosis, and he tells people that the average that his patients have lived is, again, between half a year and a year. He says there's only one exception that I know of, but he doesn't count. He says, because he is still alive after 12 years of that diagnosis, and he's a rabbi. And so the fact that he's a rabbi, I think, must have particular miraculous meaning, and he must have a purpose that keeps him alive and special divine protection. I would like to believe that, but there's far more to this. And as a person who just celebrated his 90th birthday 2 months ago, I want to tell you what I have learned and what our faith can give us in terms of coping with something so not rare, but so powerful. What is peculiar is that actually this is something we all should know every day of our lives. Every day of our lives brings us closer to the end of the miracle of our lives, and yet we choose to ignore it. The Roman philosopher Seneca said very powerfully that the day that we most fear is actually the birthday of our eternity. We somehow forget that. And what I wanted to make clear before anything else is that Judaism insisted that we acknowledge, that we recognize the reality of mortality. Shuv yom echad lifnei misoscha, says the Talmud. Do tshuva, repent, live your life properly, one day before your death. And of course, the question then is raised, well, how do you know what that day is? And the response is powerful. And the response is, indeed, you don't know, and therefore treat every day as if it is the day before you're going to die. Now, when we say that, we are following a tradition that has a number of different aspects. You know that on Yom Kippur, perhaps the holiest day of the year, the day when we most are to feel our link with God and our sense of purpose on earth, we wear a kittel. A kittel is a white garment of death, comparable to what is put on us when we are no longer here on earth. Why would we do that during life? Because on every day of holiness, we are to remember our physical limitations, and we are to recognize and acknowledge the fact that we will not always be here. That is powerful. That is remarkable. Now, I once was in Israel and took a special tour where there are synagogues representing different communities from around the world. And one of them was a synagogue from South Africa. And what was amazing was that I entered the shul and I saw that built into one of the walls, not the wall that carried the Or Kodesh and that had the Torah in it, but a side wall, nevertheless, very visible, that had a coffin. I couldn't understand because we don't even allow Kohanim to enter a place with a coffin. There couldn't be a dead body there. What in the world was that doing in a synagogue? And I asked the gentleman who was doing the tour, and he said, "You Americans don't seem to understand. So many people don't grasp, but we have a great tradition. We want to live our lives with the awareness that we are here for a purpose, and we must fulfill that purpose in the years that are granted to us. And therefore, we have a coffin in the synagogue to remind us that we won't be here forever." That's remarkable. Now, in the aftermath of our lives on earth, people have a halachic, a legal obligation to rip kriya. And I think very few of us understand or know the mystical connotation of that. We tend to say that the mitzvah, the law of kriya, of rending our garments, is simply a way of releasing our grief, of giving vent to how horribly we feel at this death. But the Kabbalistic, the mystical interpretation is far more profound. We are a combination, a duality of two things. We have a body and we have soul. God created Adam from the dust of the earth. That's physical. And then he blew into him his spirit. There's an aspect of God in us. God is within us. And that means if we carry God as part of us, and God is immortal, then by definition, there is a part of us that is immortal, that lives on after the passing of our physical. That is remarkable, and that is symbolized by the fact that just as I am wearing a garment now, and the garment is external to me, it is not me, it's just something that I'm wearing. The relationship of my suit to my body and my reality and myself is comparable to the relationship of the body to the soul, to our neshama. It is a way of saying that there is an aspect of us that is godly and forever. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a room when somebody passed away. One of the euphemisms that is a very intriguing euphemism for death is that the person expired. Now, expired in English comes from two words. Spiritus means breath, and ex means out. And I have been there when people died, and the reality is the last breath is the moment of death, and the person is no longer a person. The body is a corpse because the spirit, which represents the godliness within us, has departed. Now, even as during life, there are moments when God offers more of himself, reveals himself more to our inner essence. And the word for that is the opposite of expire. And what is that? Inspire, where the Spirit of God, the same Spirit that makes us human, enters us in a greater way. Just as I hope now you are being inspired, we are this duality. And this duality is the essence of who we are. So I want to tell you a remarkable story with a halachic question that further allows us to grasp this truth. A number of years ago, there were two people who were extremely friendly for many years who had a fight. And it was the kind of fight that often tragically occurs where, because each one of them thought they were totally right and the other person had done a terrible thing, one of them said, "I swear I will never speak to you again or see your face." Indeed, he never went to any place where he knew that this person, his former friend, would be. He would not show up there. He cut off all communication. He cut off any possibility for even seeing him. He just didn't want to have anything more to do with them until his friend, now foe, passed away. And as so often happens after death, we see things with the kind of clarity that we didn't see during life. He felt tremendously sorry that he had lost years when he no longer had contact with his friend, sorry that he took an oath that he would never see him, and he wanted to do tshuva. He wanted to repent. But what could he do? His friend, foe, was now dead. Well, there is something that we call chesed shel emes, a chesed, a kindness of truth. It is the ultimate kindness that we can pay to somebody. It is helping to prepare the burial of someone. And he went to the Chaver Kadisha, told them the story, and said he wanted to pay last respects and to do something for his friend foe, to indicate, to prove that he recognized his mistake, that he acknowledged his wrong, and he didn't want to leave without doing a mitzvah for that person. The problem, of course, was that he had sworn to God he would never look at him again. And in helping to prepare the body with tahara, with the ritual washing of the body, with the dressing of the corpse, he said, on the other hand, I don't know if I'm allowed to. And he went to the rabbis and he asked, and the rabbis were perplexed and they searched the sources. And as they did so, a plain congregant heard the to-do. And he said, I don't understand why you are perplexed. It's a simple thing. We can learn this out from the Torah. And the rabbis questioned because they hadn't thought of it. And he said, where in the Torah? And he said, you remember that when the Jews fled Egypt and they stood by the sea, and God said to them, as you see Egypt and Egyptians today, you will never see them again. And they crossed the sea safely. And the Egyptians who drowned had their bodies washed ashore. And we are told that every Jew saw the person who had tortured him, saw the Egyptian who had given him so much grief. Well, then ask the rabbis. Then God had said you would never see them. And they did see the Egyptians again. And the answer is obvious. They saw their corpses, and that is not seeing them. To see a person, who am I? You see me, and God graced me with gray hair now, and I have blue eyes, and my face you can recognize if you'll see me again. But that's not the real me. You don't know me unless you get to know me. I am the inner me. And I want to tell you, the more you grasp that, the more you understand the difference between life and death. Death is the separation of the two, of the soul from the body. But the soul is a part of God. And therefore the soul continues its existence and its awareness, its self-awareness. The soul is the real me, and death does not destroy that, because science has proven that nothing on this earth ever disappears. It takes different forms. And therefore, death is not the same as extinction. We now live in a time where medicine has been able to achieve wonders. One of them has distinct bearing on this issue, on what I am talking about. There are people who die, and we have always said, as Shakespeare pointed out, death is the one place from which no one has ever returned. That was true for millennia. And yet, when someone has died, and by that I mean died in ways in which we measure death, no heartbeat, no brain waves, lo and behold, we have discovered by the fact that there are people who, after as much as 20 minutes to half an hour, are resuscitated, are revived, are brought back, that these people had awareness of their surroundings. In Israel, they have a story of someone who was blind his entire life. He died, and then they brought him back, and he said, I saw you. And he described what people were wearing, something he could not do in life because he was blind. He was able to record what people said. And that's impossible because he didn't have a mind, a brain to recognize the words. How is that possible? Because at that point, there is something that takes over that transcends the body. And this is true in every culture. It is true amongst people of all faiths, because this is a truth common to the reality of we are created in the image of God. And Moody, someone who has written a master book on this subject with interviews of hundreds, perhaps even thousands of people, has recorded what has happened to people who, in medical terms, have passed away and then be resuscitated. And it is fascinating to read. Almost all of them record the feeling of passing through a tunnel, going to a great light, of having a review of their lives in a short form, as if they're seeing a movie, but in what turned out subsequently to have been but a few moments, seeing their entire lives, feeling guilty about the things they did that was wrong, feeling proud of the things that they did was productive, and then standing in judgment before some kind of great light. And then, because all of them were brought back, coming back to awareness, coming back to life. Here's what I want to tell you that is probably the single most important recognition that we now have for the, at present, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of records of this kind of death back to life. They all, every single one of them, is no longer afraid to die. And they all indicate the reason they came back was because they left something undone, which means they acknowledge they had and they have a purpose in life. Purpose in life is the key to the recognition of humankind, that is why we were placed on earth. We are here to accomplish something. I want to tell you that a number of years ago, I was invited for a very remarkable event. There was a gathering of titans, 100 of the top CEOs of the major corporations, both in the United States and in the rest of the world, get together at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They have numerous lectures, all of which deal with how they can make more money ultimately, profit motive, the meaning of capitalism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one lecture is set aside for the meaning of life. And I had the great honor of being asked to be the speaker to give that particular lecture a few years ago. And I spoke about this with great trepidation because I was talking to truly important, wealthy people who could accomplish a great deal if they so chose to do. And I gave them a muscle, an illustration. And I said, every single one of you heads a major corporation, and all of you have a mission statement for your companies. And the mission statement lays out the primary goal. Google has it. Every single company has a mission statement. I said the most important aspect of your life is your family and what you achieve that is lasting for other people. I urge you to write a mission statement, not about your company, but about your being, and about you, what you see is important. I said, I'm at cemeteries very often because of my profession, because I'm a rabbi. I have seen tombstones, countless tombstones. They say, died a loving brother, died, founded this and this charity, did this and this. I have never seen died leaving $5 billion, died with a net worth of. When it gets down to ultimates, that is not the most important idea. The most important idea is to achieve, said the Lubavitcher Rebbe, if you are alive, it is because God wants you to do something for him while you are here. It takes us a while to grasp what that might be. The way in which to judge it, I think best, is by nature of your talents. What are your unique talents? What are your gifts? What has God given you with which you can accomplish that? That is major. But when you do that, your life takes on a totally different tone. Because when you fulfill what God intended for you, your soul is aware of it. And you respond with what we call simcha, what we call joy. But by joy, we don't mean having a good time. We mean the inner joy, which is the joy of purpose, the joy of accomplishment, the joy of merging with your divinity, the joy of having not your body be fulfilled. Bodily pleasure is temporary, but the part of you that is divine, feeling its divinity has had an impact upon you, that is what is crucial. Now, I was asked when I accepted this speaking engagement to answer numerous questions. There were 7 of them. Indirectly, I think I've touched upon the key to most of them. But I want to tell you that the subject is too broad to really cover in the context of a relatively short presentation. However, in the book, which I hope that you read, because it represents the end result of the wisdom I acquired because of my realization that I'm going to die, that I will die sometime. And I think the reason that I'm still alive is because God said, I want you to write this book and I want you to be around to talk about it so that these ideas can become the warp and the woof of the humanity. I don't simply say Jews, of all of us. I summarize at the end, and I want to at the very least, tell you the summation of the ideas that I have in this book that can give you peace of mind, that can remove the fear that so many people have of life, because you will grasp, as the Kotzker Rebbe said, that death is moving from one room to another, from a simple entranceway to a magnificent palace. You will have the true feeling of the reality of that statement. Now, I close the book with 5 major teachings that remove any fear you may have about death. But let me just read to you the last one. And the last one I take from something that Einstein said. Einstein said there are 2 ways to live life. One is to not believe in miracles, that there are no miracles. The other is to believe that everything in life is a miracle. To live life with that belief is to come to appreciate the miracle of your life. Life itself is a miracle, and the miracle of death, which supersedes the first miracle and will give us even more than we saw in our first miracle. Now, let me just read you this paragraph. And I want to tell you that it is the conclusion of a life lived as a rabbi, as a teacher of Torah, as a husband, a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a friend, and has come to understand some things from, I divide my life into BCE and CE as they do with regard to history, as before the coming of the end and the recognition of my eventual dying, and in fact, my thinking that that was going to happen soon, and the years now that I know that death is a reality of my life, but I understand that I'm here. So I'm here for a reason. And if I understand the reason or the reasons, then my life is meant to be a blessing. Let me read you the conclusion of the book. My faith has taught me to appreciate life and to be prepared for death, to be ready and not to fear, to know that what follows is even better than what preceded, and to be wise enough to share the conviction of the Hasidic rabbi who, when asked on his deathbed how he was feeling, responded, "Almost well." It is profoundly meaningful that we universally speak of the angel of death. If death is carried out by an angel, its mission must be divinely ordained, and its purpose must be suffused with mercy, with infinite love, and with divine wisdom. That is why, fully aware of my imminent mortality, I will, in the words of the 23rd Psalm, fear no evil, for thou art with me. I hope that you read the book in order to get far more of what I was able to share with you in this relatively short period of time. But more than read, I hope you absorb truths. They are not simply religious truths or Jewish truths. They are universal truths. I was profoundly moved when I read the eulogy that the sister of Steve Jobs gave for her famous brother, Steve, who, as he was dying, was looking around, and it was as if he was part of this world and already part of the other. He looked at his children, looked at his wife. He saw, obviously, more than the vision of his eyes. And then all of a sudden, he lifted his face, and it was as if he saw something in the room, as if he saw an angel, because he just lit up and he smiled. And there's no doubt in my mind, or the mind of his family, that he saw what we call the angel of death. He saw the other world, a portion of it. His last words, repeated 3 times, were, "Wow, wow, wow." And then he expired. I hope telling you of how he expired will inspire you and all of us. It was an honor to be asked to speak to you today. Thank you very much for this privilege.